Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. Today I'm excited to be talking to someone who is not only an author, an entrepreneur, she is also a decorated veteran, and it's perfect for today since we're just past Flag Day. We're going to be talking about one of her books. She has more than one, but it's a bilingual book celebrating military moms and military families. And her name is Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. So we've been talking about, this is one of her books. It's called Buenas noches, Capitán Mama, or Good Night, Captain Mama. And she just got on here. Let me get her on. All about how she just started writing books and how this book can help kids deal with all the emotions and questions they have about having a parent, especially a mom, in the military. Hello.
Hi, how's my light?
Good. You're sideways though.
I'm sideways. Okay, I'm gonna have to not use this then. I'll just hold it right here. It's fine.
Is that all right?
Like this. Yeah. No, it's fine. This is good.
Well, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. I know you were scheduling us between clients because you were so busy and you just got back into town from being at an event. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk to you.
It's air show season. Can I just say that? It's air show season and we have school districts planning for the new school year. So it's all good. Just good things are happening. So always a pleasure though. So thank you for being flexible with the timing.
Oh, sure. Well, we're glad to talk with you. And maybe you can introduce yourself. I gave a little bit of an intro, but you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and also how you got started with all the other things that you've been doing. How did you get into writing children's books?
Yeah, well, I'd like to introduce myself as Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. I'm a bilingual storyteller who teaches others how to become epic storytellers of their value through the branding. So I think all the work that I do is inspired by my decade of flying for the Air Force, which happened after I received a ROTC scholarship to Berkeley. So the Air Force invested for me to go to college. And then afterwards, I became an officer, which I want more people to know about that because a lot of people know about going in after high school, but this is not that. This is have the military invest in your education and go in as an officer. So I love the flying so much, I created a company to really inspire and share this crazy flying gas station adventure in English and Spanish. So it came from there, but my son actually inspired me to write when he said, "I love you, Captain Mama." Aww. So it's all those things. Yeah, all the things together.
I mean, it's just an amazing book. So like you said, your children's books are inspired by your military aviation service. And when we talk about representation, that's really an area that we don't have a lot of representation. So what were you trying, kind of what gaps were you trying to fill with your books, and what kind of reaction have you gotten from military families? Because they must be so happy to have this book out there.
So did you show one of the books?
I have one, and I know I have the other one, and of course I couldn't put my hands on it, which
I
is
have
a good
them here.
It's like we're reading it that I can't find it.
Right. Yeah, well, if you put it back up again, I'll tell you about that cover. Okay, that cover was really conceived by my illustrator because it's a good night book. My son saw me in my flight suit. That's what this first book is about, the night that I was inspired to write. And he was asking, he's pulling the patches off. What is this patch? What is this? And then what is this on your shoulder? And I said, I'm a captain. Exactly. So it's all the questions, right? What is she wearing? What does this mean? What does that mean? So the colorful patches attracted his attention. Exactly. See the rank on her shoulder, yeah, I'm a captain, like the captain of a ship. Yeah, something like that. So the cover, though, if you come back to the cover, Leanna, it's this idea that a mom and an aviator. So you can fly the airplane and you can have your child. These things are not mutually exclusive. There's still a myth of that, even though now in 2023, we have women who are fighter pilots married to men who are fighter pilots, and they're taking pictures of her and her big old pregnant belly with the couple right by the fighter that she flies, and it's all normal now. So, but it's not known. And I think we're still not raising our girls to grow up to think that they can be aviators. That's how we're stuck at this 5% number. So that cover is so intentionally motherhood and aviator in one beautiful illustration. And then we continue in the second book where now she's at the airplane and then there's her kids and then the whole class, his whole class is now going to visit this plane and Captain Mama's surprise. And the representation is that it's a woman that's on the air crew. In fact, 3 of the 4 air crew are women. And so I really wanted it to be women that you see. But very importantly, this book is narrated by little Michael. It's the child's voice. So we can hear his awe and wonder and pride of what his mom does and his understanding and the curiosity of his friends of, what is this and what is that on the plane. And then the third one that we launched last fall, Taking Flight, he's now getting to take off and sit between the pilots. And when again, he's narrating. So now we're hearing his voice as they experience the aerial refueling that I got to do for a decade. That looks like this beautiful illustration where you're literally attached to other airplanes in the sky and he's telling you what that's like. So I love this illustration, but it's his voice, right? So it was about having, the women be seen in the voice of the child, so it appeals to little boys as well. But I did it in Spanish because the night that my son called me and he said, "I love you, Captain Mama," I researched and I thought, wow, do women veterans even write books about what they did? Do we even have literature that normalizes military service that women do? The Air Force is over 20% women now, by the way. My daddy wears combat boots. Those are still the themes, right? Military spouses write them. But where are the books written by we women who have served? So I was trying to fill the gap of women who serve writing for kids. There's 3 of us now that have written books about our careers. There's 3 of us. That's it. It's 3 of us. And also the Spanish, because that was my first language. So if your parents are reading to you in Spanish, I want there to be literature that shows a mama flying an airplane. And I did that because there's all the bilingual literature that exists, published by New York, that continues to perpetuate these stereotypes of who Latinas are. And the girls are in the kitchen making tacos, chocolate, or tortillas with their mama or abuela. And I'm like, oh my God, really? Can we do more? And so that's all the gaps I was trying to fill, is literature written by women who have served, showing moms serving because they're also moms, and then very much doing it in Spanish so I could really bring that story of, that's where I started. And yeah, you too can learn all this stuff, including English, to go fly planes. So I hope that was a complete answer about the gaps.
Definitely, because I think what's so interesting is that it does fill so many gaps, like you're talking about, whether it's about military families, but it's specifically women, moms, Latinx. You covered all these bases, but it's in this one beautiful series. And yet it's all based on your experience. This wasn't something you sat down and said, what can I do to check off all these boxes? This was just your own experience that you were wanting to share that wasn't being represented, which I think is what makes the voice come through so clearly.
Well, and it's that, and it's also the realization of all these interesting intersections that just represent what I've done. And I didn't answer the reaction from the military families. I want to tell you one story. When that first book came out, one of the very first messages I got was from Karen Torres, a teacher in Baltimore, Maryland area. And I got this email saying, "Oh my goodness, I just read about your book and I forgot which magazine, but I need to get a copy signed by you for my twin sister who's currently a captain in the Marine Corps, currently deployed to Afghanistan, and I'm watching her 2-year-old daughter for the year that she's gone." So I remember I got to sign a book for Carissa. Carissa's the twin. She's the major now in the Marines. So I signed a book for her twin sister addressed to her daughter. And it was really important for her to get the book and to be able to tell her that your mom is also a captain. And she's currently deployed. And there's a page in there about how I miss you so much when you go away. And as she got older, that became so important to acknowledge that that's part of your experience. Your mom signed up to serve. You didn't, but you also are serving in a different way as a military connected child. So that was, I think, the very first story that that I remember that really hit home how important it was to see women represented and to explain it to the child. But also, you know, I've gone to conferences like the Joint Leadership Symposium for Women in Washington, D.C., Joint Women Leadership Symposium, which is active duty women gathering to network all services. And then there's a transition part for the women who are about to get out. And they just come over like, oh my God, look, like it's us, right? And it's like, yes, it's us. And then I say, and when you get out, when it's your time, when you have the time, please write more books for kids, because like there's only 3 of us that have even done it. So yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, like you mentioned, is that the later books are really in the voice of the child. Who there's some kids who are in military families, and yet they're very underrepresented in the books. And this one, I think, I mean, your books really give space for them to voice those questions and those fears that maybe they haven't felt safe doing, or they weren't, you know, aren't really able to. So how can books really serve as being that tool to help them kind of work through all these thoughts and mixed emotions? Because the boy in the book, obviously he's very proud of his mom, but he's also worried and he misses her. There's like all these emotions. How can books really help work through this?
You know, the whole concept of text to self, right? The text to self that we learn when our kids are learning to read. You know, what do you read in the book that sparks your imagination about something that you know? Because that's always so important. So that's a part of it, is to be able to make space for, say, well, you know, Marco misses his mom when she goes away. You know, has your parent gone away? Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Not everybody deploys, right? But it's that sense of understanding that the story is about a kid like me. And then if you're reading it in Spanish, it's cool too, because maybe your parent isn't in the military, but they also go away because they drive a truck or something, right? So it's all those ways that the story of the parent having work, a profession that's very important to her, but how that impacts the child, because you're going to have that natural disconnect. And whether it's military or not, I think all parents can have those conversations. That's really a big important part of it. The other part is also, just like you said, the pride, right? You know, we just had Flag Day yesterday. So we celebrated the origin of the flag and who made the flag and why we have the flag and why it looks like that. And with school out in a lot of schools, they really didn't talk about it, right? But it's that sense also that we have an all-volunteer military. So we're choosing to go, you know, the moms are choosing to serve, and really bringing together those themes of, you know, I signed up for this. It's important to me that I have this career of mine, especially aviation. You put so many years of training in that it's important for the child, boy or girl, to understand why it's important to mom that she has that job. And maybe you're not flying, but maybe you're doing something else that's important to you. Maybe you have your own business, right? And you can say, well, Captain Mama goes away and she flies this airplane, she loves her job. Just like me, I have this job. So it's this launching point for those conversations for parents to have different conversations. And lastly, my favorite example of how people bring this to life is military families. And I'm going to do a shout out to Amanda Huffman because she did it first. You know, taking this book to school where the one you have where it's about the uniform. And then they take their own uniform. She was a civil engineer in the Air Force, and say, Captain Mama's patch looks like this. She's an Air Mobility Command. I was part of this other command. And her squadron patch looks like this. Here's my squadron patch. It's also on my shoulder. And here's what it looks like. And here's, so again, it's like relaying your own service with your own uniform. And the guide is how Captain Mama is explaining it to her child. And she explains it to her sons. And now she's actually taken that book, you know, Read Across America Week in March. She takes that book into the classroom, and others have begun to do this too, and talks about her service. So lots of different ways to relate the story to a child and to the experience of the working parent, especially working moms.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned about bringing it to people who aren't necessarily directly connected to the military, because like you said, I mean, this is such a special book for military families, but there are a lot of families who aren't directly connected to the military, and I think it's so important for them to also understand what that's like. What is it like if there's a kid in your class and his mom is deployed? What does that feel like for you? What is in, and even just getting to details, like you had the one about refueling, or you know, the planes being connected. You know, I mean, kids love that kind of stuff. And it's
Yeah.
getting to the nitty gritty of it. Of I think that's so great, especially like you said, we just had Flag Day. We're coming up on Independence Day, and I think it's important for us to understand, you know, for everybody to understand what it's like to be in a military family. What is it? What do you think for non-military families? What is the main message you want to get across that you want them to understand?
I think inquisitiveness. You know, yeah, percentages. You know, very, very. What 1% of American women serve in the military? I mean, that's it. So 99% of women don't. So how can you enjoy a story about a mom who serves if you have no connection? Well, it's simple. You read the story and then you talk about your work and what it means to you. And you ask your child, you know, did you know that I do this? You know, Captain Mama goes to an Air Force base to fly airplanes. You know, I go to my office and I write contracts as an attorney. So I think so many times our kids have no idea what we do as moms. And my kids certainly have known because they've gone with me now to air shows and different places that we go. But I think it's a reminder to not have such a hard line between your profession and your family, and to give your child enough information that they can understand and maybe even be proud of what you do, right? And so then when career day comes around, your child invites you to come to the classroom because they know what you do versus I have no idea what my mom does. So I think that's one way to use it, is just, well, you know, she might not be, you know, connecting her plane to another. I have to show the illustration that you just talked about. This isn't Captain Mama's surprise. Literally a flying gas station, and we're connected through the boom right here. So it might not be this wild. That's what I got to do. But it's just giving your child an opportunity to ask what you do, to be curious. Maybe you've taken them to work. Maybe you can. Maybe you can't. But what do they know about what you do and how you make your living and the profession that you invested in? Enough so that they can hopefully be proud and have conversations with others about what you do. Funny story, when you are in the military and you are in this community, this tiny community of moms who fly, there's a book that I'll recommend to you called Military Fly Moms by Linda Maloney. She spent 7 years interviewing, I think, 70 women like Captain Mama, but like real women, right? Who either had their kids while flying active duty or after. But it's an incredible coffee table book. It's beautiful pictures of, you know, women flying everything that you can imagine. And there's this beautiful section in the back about the things kids say from the mouths of babes. And my favorite story was one of the women, her son was in preschool. And so preschool starts and he's hanging up his little jacket in the cubby. And because this child's grown up around all these people flying helicopters and his mom and other people and other men and women, he's hanging up his jacket at the preschool and he says, "Hi, my name is Charlie and my mom flies helicopters. What does your mom fly?" Right? Because again, it's the context, right? In his world, all moms fly something, right? But again, such a small amount. But it's that conversation. I thought it was so sweet because what a cool moment we live in where a little boy thinks that. And it opens up conversations about, like, your mom flies? What does she fly, right? So I think all those reasons, and to really, if there's military-connected children in your community, you know, just ask questions, you know, like, you know, what do their parents do? And, you know, like, what service is it? The Army's not the Navy's not the Air Force is not the Coast Guard. You know, can we, like, know what, you know, what service they're in? And just, you know, realize that if they are a frontline operational person that does deploy, that child does need extra support. And just sometimes kids asking about what their parents do, that's enough to just make a kid feel like, hey, somebody cares.
Yeah, right? And feel special and proud and like people care about them.
Exactly. Just that other people want to know. It just makes you feel good. Yeah.
Well, and I do, before our time's up, I did want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about just your career as an author, because we talk a lot about on this channel about people following their dreams and how you turn that dream into reality. So I'm curious, because you have done so many different things. I mean, when I was looking over your bio, I was just kind of, I mean, you talked about your military career, corporate world, you're author and entrepreneur, a speaker, you're doing air shows. I mean, you do so many different kinds of things. And then, also writing these award-winning children's books. How did you have that confidence to say, okay, I'm going to make these very very big career changes. And,
Yeah.
you know, how did it go from having the inspiration to making it a reality?
Hmm. Yeah, well, the very first book that we published is called Latinovating. I happen to have it here. It's
Mm.
Green American Jobs and Latinos Creating Them. So my first entree into becoming a published author was being inspired by the stories of others, other entrepreneurs who are from the Latino community, and just really wanting to put new narratives out there that directly clash and destroy the negative, kind of disgusting corporate stereotypes that we see from media about who Latinos are. So that was my first book. And, also just being a humble pie kind of military person, I wasn't ready to tell my story. It was like, let me talk about all these other people. But along the way is when my son saw me in the flight suit, and it was that moment of inspiration that I have a story too, and I could write my memoirs, which I started writing when I was active duty, never have finished them, because I think it's much more important to inspire kids in English and Spanish than to tell my story, which, I'll eventually get to it, but who's going to want that, not kids who are 8. So I'm more interested in inspiration. That's actually the tagline for the business is we're in the business of inspiración. It's kind of a Spanglish tagline. But to your question, I did a lot of research as an entrepreneur on what it looks like to be an author. What do you get paid, the business end of it. And Scholastic wanted to publish Goodnight Captain Mama. I actually met with an agent, took him all the way down the business conversation. I realized I'd be getting 50 cents a book. I was like, I get 50 cents, the agent gets 30% of every sale, but the agent just introduced me to the publisher. How about no? How about if I'm an entrepreneur and I own the intellectual property and I get to make those business decisions? So for me, it was more of a mission of, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to tell my story about my military service, I don't want to be giving away 90% of the revenue of that idea to some dude in New York. Right. I mean, that's very blunt, but that's what it became. And so I made the conscious choice to learn the business of publishing. And so I don't go out into the world, just as an author, as I say. I go out there as a creator, as a publisher. We make our own distribution agreements. We have niche distributors like Electorum in New Jersey that buy big orders for county offices of education and school districts. So I wanted to make this something I could actually do for a living, which is why we do the speaking. The literature launches speaking opportunities, teacher associations, keynotes at Texas Association for Bilingual Education, San Antonio Association for Bilingual Education, anywhere where there's bilingual, dual language programs, or aviation events. I'm going to Oshkosh in Wisconsin next month at the end, like the big, huge air show in Oshkosh. And then the air shows, a colonel friend of mine is like, what do you mean you're not going to air shows with your beautiful books? Hello. And I'm like, I should go to air shows. So I'm a creator. Yes, I wrote the book, but then very quickly it's out of my hands. It goes into the whole project team to actually make the beautiful book and the illustration, the editing, translation, and all this, and everything that in 2 languages. I have a project manager that does that. And then I become the marketer of the idea. And then I want to make sure that we have these different revenue streams and markets for all the places where we can inspire. So air shows is the newest thing. And I'm wearing my shirt that says Avión Narradora because I've been showing up with 2 languages, and now they're asking me to announce the air show action in Spanish. Wow. So I just got to do that in Oregon, all for 3.5 hours, announcing what you're seeing at the air show in Espanol on Facebook Live and on live radio. Because if you don't know Spanish, you're like, oh, what a pretty blue airplane. And then you can't fall in love with aviation. I want to diversify the sky. I want to get kids thinking about aviation and airplanes at a very young age. That's really why I write. I want you to be so inspired about airplanes. Like, I never thought about that because I was never on a plane until I was halfway through Berkeley. And that's just not enough. So I really want more kids to go to air shows, especially, families like mine who never even knew there was an air show because nobody told us in Spanish language media. So
were you originally going to go into a different branch of the military? Because you said you went to Berkeley on ROTC scholarship. Air Force
ROTC scholarship. No, it was always going to be Air Force. But yeah, that's an important detail. How do I go to college? Magic question. I encourage kids to ask, how can I? Right. What is it that you want to do, but you have no idea how to do it? Adults too. How can I create a publishing company? How can I create award-winning bilingual children's books? I don't know. I'm going to ask the question and attract people to help me. It started with me in high school. How can I go to college?
Mm.
And my high school counselor said, you know what? Come to my house for dinner. Meet my husband. He'll tell you how he went to college out of Appalachia, how he got out.
Mm.
And her husband happened to be an Air Force major who had gone to school on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. He was one of 9 kids. And he said, this is how I did it. This is how you can do it. And he held my hand through the application process so I could apply for the Air Force ROTC scholarship. So again, I wasn't looking to join the military. I was looking to go to college. And the military had the scholarship that made it possible for me to go to college. And I was going to pay it back with 4 years of service.
Mm-hmm.
That got bumped up to 7 years of service when I got selected to fly. But I could have said no thank you to the flying and just done the 4 years. But I'm like, what? I can go fly? What? Yeah, sign me up. Yeah. So yeah, again, I fell into it. And that's why I so intentionally do this work and show up in so many places, because I can't hope that you're going to get lucky and meet an aviator as your high school counselor's husband.
And
so I want people to know.
Kudos to the high school counselor, because I also hear a lot of nightmare stories about high school counselors that don't really take time. And so that's one, you had one that introduced you to somebody who was such a great mentor. But
yes, but I kept showing up multiple times. That's key. You can't just go one time and go, oh, they don't have time for me and leave. I was there a lot. You know, where are the top schools for architecture? I wanted to study architecture, which is what I studied. But yeah, you know, the ratios, I think in California, it'd be fun for you to find out, you know, what the ratios are in your state. But in California, it's like 800 students for one guidance counselor.
Mm. Yeah,
you got to be tenacious.
I'm actually in California also.
Oh, so. You are. Good. So yeah, that's our ratio here. 800 students for one guidance counselor. So only the most tenacious students who keep showing up are going to get the help.
Right.
But there's a lesson in there for all of your life too. So to advocate for yourself. So yeah. But again, how can I is the key question. How can I go to college? How can I start a business? How can I write books? How can I enter the air show industry? That was my question at the beginning of 2022.
I love getting. I can see why you're such a sought after speaker. I do want, but I'm looking at the time, and I want to be respectful because I know you're very busy. So I'll wrap it up. But I feel like I keep talking to you for a long time because this is just so fascinating. But I do want to give you a chance to say,
thank you.
There's going to be another book, because I think there are 3 now, right?
There's 3 now, yes, and we just launched the 3rd one. There's definitely going to be a 3rd book, because I will show you how this one ends. This one ends with they're in the air, and they all are sleeping in their hammocks in the back of the plane, because they're going to go land in Venice, Italy. So it's like magic school bus meets aviation. And we can imagine that an entire class of kids gets to fly on a flying gas station and go around the world. So then we'll land in Italy, and then we'll have an adventure there and go on to the next place and refuel the next airplane. And that's the concept that I have in my mind. Is in this one we got to see the F-22 and the F-117 first and second generation stealth fighters. After we run around Venice and have an on-ground adventure, that'll relate again back to aviation in certain tricky ways. But then we'll go have another flight somewhere else and refuel a different plane and land in a different country. So I'm imagining a series where every book, every flight, there is a new country, new airplanes to refuel, new places to go, and always in 2 languages. So again, expand our imaginations and keep seeing images of women flying the plane.
I love it. If you haven't checked out the series yet, I really encourage you to do so. It's really wonderful, and I can't wait to see what other books come in the series. Thank you so much for taking the talk with us.
Sure. Well, I'd like to encourage your audience to call the air show organizers at the air show in your town and say, hey, I just heard about this Captain Mama woman who comes to air shows and brings her flight suits for kids to try on, and she gets sponsored to give away books. Have you guys invited Captain Mama to the air show? I want everybody to do this, whether you're at a Navy base or an Army base or Air Force base, civilian air shows, because as more people request that we come to air shows, more people will invite us. We've got air show in Houston on the calendar for the fall, and also Little Rock, Arkansas. So we'll be at Wings over Houston, and then Little Rock, Arkansas, Thunder Over the Rock. Both of those are in October. So, and then other air shows are getting added, later in the summer as well. So, CaptiveMama.com is where you can find us.
I have the schedule of the shows that you'll be at?
Yep, that's where we put the schedule. Correct. Yep, and yeah, so CaptiveMama.com is you can learn more. My bio's there, pictures of what it was like to serve in the Air Force. And I always welcome comments, and questions on Instagram. Like my niece is thinking about joining the Air Force. I'm like, okay, has she applied for the scholarship? Because they always, they're thinking about after, what scholarship? So I'm always educating people on the fact that there is this officer training track of the academy and the scholarships. Because yeah, the recruiters are in the high schools, so of course they know about joining.
Right.
But do you know about joining as an officer?
Mm.
And I really want that for girls. It's so important for girls to go in as officers in position of power. Yeah.
That's a great.
Very important. Yeah.
Thank you. And
so, well, thank you for your curiosity, Leanne. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate getting to talk with you and love your book. And thank you for joining us. And thanks to everybody who's watching. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.